Do you know what's truly possible when it comes to automatic tank gauging or ATG solutions? In this episode with DFS Senior Sales and Business Development Manager Tim Firkins and DFS Business Development Director of ATG Fergus Heading, we discuss the importance of ATG consoles and how installation of an ATG is less complex than many might think, and why now is the right time to invest or upgrade in an ATG system. Listen as we help you gauge the possibilities through tank gauging. Hi Fergus, Tim. Thank you for joining us today.
Good afternoon, Sarah.
Afternoon.
So, fuel retailers often face challenges in managing their fuel information and operations efficiently. Given that these challenges can lead to significant negative impacts on business performance and stability, we believe it's crucial to emphasise the importance of having reliable and sustainable tank gauging equipment readily available. And that's why we've got you on the podcast today. So, Fergus, to start, automatic tank gauging can be a complex concept for many. Could you clarify what this process involves?
I can, yeah. So one, it's not a complex solution either. We have a very entry-level solution based on wireless technology all the way up to the full pressure line leak detection.
Mm-hmm.
From the beginning, it's really to do about the tank depth or diameter, not to do with the volume of the tank. So that indicates the length or depth of the tank and the probe that we need for it. The rest of it is the console that's installed inside the building. So very simple, very straightforward. And as we said, the wireless tank gauge is really, really easy to install. Doesn't impact the forecourt, reduces people being on the forecourt. No need to dig up the ground to install any cables if they don't have any. So no. For us, tank gauging is a day-to-day solution.
Yeah. Certainly sounds like it and not as complex as many might think. Tim, just coming to, has tank gauging always played a vital role in fuel retail operations, or has its significance gradually developed over the last few years?
I would say the answer is yes and no, actually. If you look, like I'm sat here in the UK at the moment, when I started in this industry in the UK some 23 or something years ago, I came across, as I started to learn the industry, came across practically every single station having a tank gauge. It was just commonplace. When I then moved on to working in international markets, kind of 6-7 years later, I was actually surprised to learn how many were not like that, how many markets actually didn't have automatic tank gauging. So actually over the years in more sort of developing markets, we've seen a real growth in more recent years in the deployment of tank gauging, and there's still plenty of space to grow still. So I think if I think back, I'm not sure exactly what the statistic is now, but if I think back kind of 3 or 4 years ago, I remember we did a study and we discovered that actually there was a 60% sort of market share globally of sites with tank gauges. So that would mean that there were 40% actually that had nothing. So that was only a few years ago. So actually that's why I say the answer is yes and no. It depends where you are in the world.
Yeah. And when you say 40% don't have tank gauging up until about 3 years ago, what would they have instead? What would they have in place?
So typically they'd be using what we refer to as a dipstick. So it is literally like a big ruler, which is dipped into the tank, manually, physically dipped into the tank. And that is used to measure the amount of fuel that's in the tank. But obviously that's very inaccurate. It's subject to human error. It's subject to the person using it may or may not put it all the way to the bottom of the tank. They may misread it. They may not go and do that in the first place. So yeah, it's subject to, it's a very outdated concept, but it is still used in a surprising number of stations around the world. Now, obviously the other thing it does is, even if the process goes correctly, the dipstick is used correctly, is read correctly, is recorded correctly, it will not record to the same accuracy that a automatic tank gauge will record. It will not be able to take into account all of the different parameters that an automatic tank gauge can take into account. In the absolute worst case, sites are not even dipping tanks. That's very rare, but it's not unheard of.
Yeah. And I can imagine as well, through a manual process, you're only going to do that a few times a day, whereas with a tank gauge, that's...
Absolutely.
Yeah, typically maybe even once a day, actually, in some cases.
Okay.
And like I say, even in some cases, it may not even happen.
Yeah. Well, kind of touching on that, Fergus, I'll come to you. What are some of the challenges or implication a fuel retail business could face without having the adequate tank gauge and equipment in place? Like we mentioned, the manual process there.
So, well, to dovetail into what Tim has said also around tank gauges and the processes that happen on site, we got asked by a customer a number of years ago why they should buy our tank gauge.
Mm-hmm.
And we asked them a question back again, which we shouldn't do, but we asked, why do they want a tank gauge? And they said they'd never been asked before.
Yeah.
So tank gauge, as Tim touched on, is relevant for health and safety, inventory management, stock control, delivery cycle. So we're not delivering fuel on a Tuesday and a Thursday, we're delivering when it needs it, optimizing their fuel, leak detection, environmental risk. So there's a whole platter of solutions and functions that it covers just with one piece of equipment. The whole idea is that we try to remove the need of manual intervention, like dipping tanks, putting people on forecourts, and the staff are then looking after customers, which they're employed for, and we let the electronics and the solutions deal with all the operational issues.
And if you think about what can change in a tank underground in a relatively short space of time, again, if you go back to the sort of example of using manual tank dipping once a day, maybe a couple of times a day if you're lucky, well, what happens if suddenly there is a catastrophic leak in a tank? Or what happens if suddenly your competitive station over the road is closed for whatever reason? And you end up selling twice the amount of volume that you would normally do through that tank. It's a dynamic situation. It's not enough just to monitor that once per day. So what our tank gauge is and what any decent tank gauge is doing is providing that monitoring 24/7 in real time. What we then do with that data is to collect that data and provide insights into that data again in near real time. So, it takes you from that level of that sort of blindness that you have by just going through a once or twice a day dipstick process to a real true level of visibility of what's going on underground, and really crucially, visibility of when something changes underground. And that's the key factor here, I would say.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Even to a point of reputation for the site. As Tim touched on, the site across the road is closed. I've now run out of fuel, so now I'm closed as well. So by monitoring everything, we can provide a much better service for the customer, which is the goal at the end.
100%. It allows them to be more competitive as well. Like if they know that they can increase their volume because certain sites in similar, like the surrounding area, are out of stock or out of business.
Absolutely.
They know how they can manage that. And I think as well, one of the key things that you pulled out was visibility. A lot of the measurement is underground. It's not something that you can just check in by popping into another room. It's not something that you see every day. And if you're only checking once, twice, 3 times a day, it's, like you said, not enough.
It's a term we keep going back to. It's something that we got from an oil company when we asked them, and it was visibility. I can't really think of a better word for it because they can see everything at the touch of a button or the looking of a screen. Whether it's remotely, locally on the site, the information is all the same.
Yeah.
And they can react accordingly to it. Do I need to order more fuel? Do I have a potential environmental risk? Do I need to call somebody?
Yeah.
Nearly in real time.
And I think it's fair to say as well that those who don't have an ATG right now or haven't invested yet, it's fair to say that they're missing out on opportunities to become more competitive, increase their efficiencies, and gain that full site control that they need.
Absolutely, and also to stay in line with local rules around environmental issues, around health and safety, to make sure they're compliant. They change every day, every month. Depending on maybe they've changed their fuel dispensers and they've gone from suction to pressure. Now we need to put in some protection on the pressure lines to detect any risk or potential leaks.
Yeah.
And I think if you think about the link between equipment and data also, right? If you've got competitors who are using the data from their tank gauging or other automation equipment to make smart, efficient decisions, and you're not doing it, then it's obvious that you're going going to fall behind. Those smart, efficient decisions could be in relation to delivery planning, or they could be in relation to actually how do I reduce losses on my station. There's a number of things that come from it. So I think sometimes it can be tempting just to think about the piece of hardware and think about the job the piece of hardware is doing. But actually, the job the hardware does primarily, in my opinion, is actually to generate data that can then be used to make smart business decisions. It's important to think of it in that sort of end-to-end holistic concept.
Yeah. And they say now that data is basically gold when it comes to anything, including fuel retail.
Information is power.
Yeah.
Yeah. And let's face it, fuel is super expensive and isn't going to get any cheaper.
Mm.
So actually, it's an asset that really, really needs looking after, and it needs looking after both from a financial perspective in terms of maximizing that asset, ensuring that there isn't unnecessary loss, that you're not giving away fuel, et cetera, but also in terms of looking after that asset from a health and safety and environmental perspective as well. And really, you can't do either of those two things unless you start with that tank gauging equipment on the station.
Yeah, that kind of leads nicely into our next question. We kind of want to know how ATG equipment, including like the consoles and probes, can enhance the safety and profitability of daily operations.
So in a nutshell, one of the biggest features that we have is leak detection. So we can run either static leak tests or continuous leak tests where we don't have to disrupt any fueling on the site. We can also monitor the pressure lines. But these solutions are all very scalable for customers.
Okay.
So we have very entry level that will provide basic information for them, and then they can scale up like Lego. They can add more bits to it as it goes on, depending on if their local rules or regulations change. And then if we're in a region where we do need to have certification, all of our tank gauges come with the relevant ATEX UL for safety, ICX, EPA certification, OML. It's all standard with the product. So you get that peace of mind that we have something that has been tested. It does do what it's meant to do as it says on the box. And it's like fit and forget, put it in. Coupled with the wet stock management solution, and we're providing data to it, then they have this real-time interface to everything that happens.
Yeah.
Whether that's a theft, a potential leak, everything is monitored in real time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the retailers that utilize tank gauging most effectively are those who are considering how is this helping us from a HSSE perspective.
Yeah.
Tank gauges can be installed and forgotten about to an extent, but actually, if you install and forget about them, you don't get the most out of them. Actually, if you manage them correctly, if you manage the data from them correctly, then that's where you're going to have that peace of mind that tells you we're confident that actually we know what's going on underground. It's there's not many areas in sort of the retail world where actually you're completely blind without something like this helping you from a health and safety perspective. It's arguably one of the most important pieces of equipment on a station, I would say.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about this earlier, but there's some sites that do have it installed in terms of ATG and wetstock and some that don't. For anyone looking to either invest in or upgrade their existing console, what's the right time to do that? How would a retailer determine when to upgrade or invest?
I would say today. Start today and reap the benefits of it. Have that peace of mind that in the back of your mind or your back of your head that everything is under control, it's managed. I can now focus on my customers. Something we didn't touch on is that fuel is used to entice customers into your shop. If you're not selling any of it, they're not coming. So we need to provide solutions where it's uptime, not about downtime.
Yeah, and I would say that in my personal opinion, and I'm sure Fergus and many more of us on sort of in our area in the industry would agree on this. My personal opinion is automatic tank gauging should not be an option. It is a must. So actually, I completely agree with Fergus. The time to invest is now. And if if the concern is, the cost of that, there are really cost-effective options available. We have cost-effective options available. There are even options available where actually if CapEx is an issue, then you can think about ways to invest just through OpEx. So, it shouldn't be an option. And the biggest thing I would say is, do it now. You won't regret it. You can be creative. We can be creative as suppliers with finding ways to make the investment work for you.
Yeah. And I
Absolutely.
suppose, sorry, Fergus, on you go.
No.
I'm just going to say, I suppose for those retailers who are probably listening to this thinking, oh, I've already got an ATG system in place, like I'm fine, I don't need to upgrade. Why is it important for them to consider an upgrade if they already have an existing system?
Some of it is based on technology. So we have better performing devices. Some of it is based on end of life. Tank gauges do have quite a long life cycle, maybe 10 to 15 years. But there is some companies like ourselves where some products are coming up to that end of life because we can no longer get the components to manufacture them. With the solutions available from Dover, we take all of that into consideration. So we have some equipment that is backwards compatible. We can support older consoles and older probes up to a certain level. And back to what Tim touched on, make that investment spread over time rather than one hit. So we can reuse some of the probes or some of the sensors and have a phased approach.
I think the other thing worth mentioning is that, in the past, like so earlier, I mentioned sort of my first impression starting in this industry. There was always an ATG console, there was a pump controller, there was a point of sale system. In more recent times, some of those things have been able to merge together. So now we, for example, can offer our ATG probes connected to our Fusion forecourt system, forecourt controller, so without the need for a separate console. So, and there are other type of, similar scenarios. Now, what that means is that retailers can think a bit more creatively, again, to use that word, when they're looking at replacing other parts of their site architecture. So, for example, maybe you've got a 15, 20-year-old tank gauge on your network. Actually, your primary thing right now might be, we are making an investment in new forecourt controller technology. Now, in doing that, what you may be able to do is lose the console and actually have a direct probe connection from the probes to the forecourt controller. You think about those things, it's almost prompted by another decision you're making, but actually that flexibility that there is these days compared to 10, 20 years ago, could actually mean that it's also the right time to upgrade your tank gauge as well.
Yeah, and I think that an investment decision sometimes can be quite a considerable one for sites, particularly if you're a smaller independent site, but that compared to a potential leak, which could have severe environmental fines and
it's not even worth trying to compare.
no.
Yeah, the return on investment is really, really super compelling and really quick. The return on investment when it comes to leak detection is obvious. It's a catastrophic leak, and you would actually see that return instantly.
Yeah.
But that sort of extreme example, just the return on investment from efficiency savings point of view, from sort of operational perspective, from, like I said earlier, the point of view of what more can you do with the data that you're getting, being able to improve your delivery planning, for example, all of those things. It's really, really clear the return on investment on tank gauge.
Even to add to that, Tim, or the dispenser, over dispensing, under dispensing, deliveries, over deliveries, which is also happens. All of that is visible in real time. And that helps efficiency.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot that you can achieve by what seems like a kind of simple piece of data that you get about of the level of a tank. Actually, there's so many insights that we can get from that.
Yeah, and just kind of touching on that, you've mentioned like what insights and data an automatic tank gauge can provide retailers, but is the ATG offering the same globally from all manufacturers out there?
Well, I'll speak for us. So yes, our solution is global. So the MagLink LX family carries all the certification it needs for whatever region or country it's installed in, whether that's with the EPA, UL, ATEX, IC, OML. We have all that certification. So we do have the same product that's available everywhere, which brings some advantages to our partners and distributors because they only need to carry the one in stock to facilitate customers. And we also try to minimize the amount of components. So for example, we use the same fuel float for both petrol and diesel, which also minimizes what they need to carry in and helps with facilitating things like changing tank storage. Maybe I'm now selling more diesel than unleaded, so I want to swap them around. It means that nobody needs to touch the probes, and then from a health and safety and a maintenance perspective, they don't need to touch it. So yes, it's all available from either our European partners or across the pond in North America and Canada. It's all the same.
I suppose that must be really handy for those network owners who maybe have several sites spanning different countries. They don't want to spend the time looking at different solutions, and it's handy that you can have one that kind of covers all of the
Absolutely, it means there's an element of consistency with the data they receive and the on-site services. Even as simple mundane task as training staff on how to use it, it's the same in each region or country. So it's quite easy for them to manage.
Yeah, and from a data perspective, it's super important as well to have that consistency across the board. So, where we've one version of our console, regardless of, as Fergus said, whether it's going to the US, to Europe, or to Asia, same version of the console, which means that we will get the same format of data and the same consistency of data. And that the same then goes for actually when we connect our probes up to Fusion, as I mentioned earlier, same scenario again.
Yeah.
So that's really important for us from a data analysis perspective, because it means that you're starting off on a level playing field. It's, the region you're in, the country you're in, etc. It doesn't matter. It's a clean, consistent source of data that can be used for analysis.
Yeah. I think that's really important as well. And I know we touched on this earlier, but I think just to kind of close, why would someone buy an ATG console from Dover Fueling Solutions over someone else?
That's for you.
Well, they get to deal with people like us. So I think that, we were seen as the new kids to the game a couple of years ago. I think we've proved that we have a very reliable, cost-effective and modern solution. We've adopted modern technologies. It's all future-proofed. You can see some of it behind me. We've gone with touch and swipe on the consoles. We've reduced how much text there is to make it much more easy to use across different regions and languages. It's future-proofed in relation to the fuel type, so whether it's bioproducts blended with ethanol, HVO, even beyond that, we also have our tank gauges in some food products, in wine and beer, in water tanks, which is funny yet surreal. We're trying to find water in fuel tanks, yet we provide a solution for water tanks.
Yeah.
So for us, it's much more future-looking, cost-effective, and it's a partnership. We're not selling a product here. We're developing partners.
Yeah, and I think the ease with which we can get data off those devices as well is super important. I'm interested in data personally. Actually, it's so easy for us to get that consistent data I talked about from our range of equipment. So, with some of our competitive solutions, you may need to invest in a console and a separate kind of data collection device, logger, data collection box, whatever you want to call it. Actually, we've made sure that with all of our solutions linked to tank gauging, that it is so easy for us to get that data, and the data is so reliable. So that's super important, because again, if we go back to what we spoke about earlier, you're not just investing in a piece of hardware. You're investing in an ecosystem, if you like. The piece of hardware is super important in that ecosystem, but actually it's the enabler, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'd say that's another really important competitive advantage as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the things, just to close out in terms of an important or key takeaway from this, is that you can't see it, but it doesn't mean that you won't be able to. And that's the importance of a tank gauge console and the supporting connected solutions that go along with it, like wet stock, for example, and also the value of having a partner, and the importance of your partner helping you make those informed decisions. Because I think we've mentioned this in previous episodes, that it's not a one size fits all situation. You've mentioned there's the MagLink family, which can help small independents to large fuel networks. So it's something that
Absolutely. The partnership element is key to us, and also providing solutions for our customers. So if they come back to us and query or request some functionality or features, that's something that we're more than happy to address, because what's good for them is good for us. So we
Yeah,
improve the product and streamline it to their needs.
yeah, and I think that really sort of sums up the fact that what we're doing here with tank gauging and wet stock management solutions is solving a problem for our customers. Okay, so that customer, like you said, Sarah, is not one size fits all. Not every customer has the same problem.
Mhm.
So we are listening to our customers. We are addressing the problems that they have and finding solutions for the problems they have. On the other hand, what we are also doing is helping our customers to understand actually that there might be some problems they're not yet aware of. That's also super important. So, we look at this from quite a sort of consultative point of view.
Mhm.
It's really important for us to listen to customers, but we think it's also important for customers to listen to us from time to time.
Yeah. No, I think that's really valuable, and I think we've called this episode "Gauge the Possibilities Through Tank Gauging," and it really is. The possibilities are endless with an ATG console, and that's something that retailers should start considering today rather
Yeah.
than wait.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, we talk quite a lot when we're with customers about the art of the possible. Well, the message we try to get across is the art of the possible. It's actually what might you be able to achieve if you invested in tank gauging, if you invested in wet stock management. So I think that fits really well with the title.
Well, no, thank you both for your time today, and we look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thank
Very
you,
well.
Sarah. Thanks, Fergus.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Gauge Your Possibilities with Tank Gauging. We hope you enjoyed this episode with Tim and Fergus. If you'd like to support the podcast, feel free to share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a review. To catch the latest from Dover Fueling Solutions, you can follow us on LinkedIn or visit our website at www.doverfuelingsolutions.com. Thanks again, and we'll see you next month where we continue to fuel the conversation.